The mountain man found the bride in his tent, then rode off before the fire burned out. The snow was still falling when he crested the ridge, his horse panting clouds into the cold dusk, and the flicker of his campfire cut through the pines like a memory that didn't belong to the mountain. Cole Thatcher, trapper, loner, and half-wild himself, had left that fire burning before dawn when he rode down to check his lines. But something felt different now. The smoke rose steady, not thin and fading, and his old canvas tent was zipped shut, though he'd left it open. He dismounted without sound, hand brushing the butt of his revolver, boots sinking into snow that whispered like silk. When he pulled the flap aside, his breath caught, not from fear, but disbelief. Inside, near the dying fire, sat a young woman wrapped in a torn wedding shawl. Her cheeks red from cold, her eyes wide enough to catch every flicker of flame. For a second, neither spoke. She looked like she'd stepped out of a dream he wasn't supposed to have. "Please," she said, voice cracking, "don't send me back." Her hands trembled around the corner of a lace veil that still clung to her hair. Cole let the flap fall and stood in the silence that followed, listening to his heart slow from surprise into something heavier. "You lost?" he asked at last. She swallowed hard. "Ran." "From what?" "A wedding," she said, and when her lip quivered, she added, "From a man older than my father." Cole glanced towards the tree line. "You'll freeze if you stay out here alone." "Then I'll freeze," she said. "Better than what waits down there." He exhaled, long and low, then ducked inside, the air thick with wood smoke and panic. "You picked a bad place to hide," he muttered. "This mountain don't forgive mistakes." "Then I guess I'm home," she whispered. Her fingers were blue, her dress ripped at the hem, one boot missing. He stared at her, at the stubborn tilt of her chin, at the fire painting her face gold against the white world outside. "You can stay the night," he said finally. "Tomorrow you find your way off this ridge." She nodded, eyes soft with gratitude and something that scared him more than cold. He threw another log on the fire, its crackle filling the silence between them. Outside, the snow fell harder, erasing the trail that led to her past, and Cole sat back against the post, wondering what kind of mercy had just walked into his life uninvited. By morning, the storm had swallowed the mountain whole, and the world outside the tent had turned into a white blur that even sound refused to cross. Cole woke first, breath ghosting in the cold air, his rifle leaning against the tent pole, his thoughts still tangled in what he'd found the night before. The bride, was huddled near the fire, shawl tight around her shoulders, staring into the flames as if they might explain why she was still alive. Her lips moved sometimes, though no words came, only the faint tremor of someone who had used up every prayer she knew. "You sleep at all?" Cole asked. She didn't answer. He poured black coffee into a tin cup, the scent filling the space between them. "Ain't poisoned," he said, setting it near her. She blinked once, then nodded, wrapping her fingers around the heat. "What's your name?" he asked. Silence. "You got one, don't you?" After a long pause, she whispered, "Lena." "Lena what?" "Doesn't matter. I left it behind." Cole studied her face in the dim light, the curve of her cheek where the veil had rubbed raw, the bruise half hidden under the edge of her jaw. "Who hit you?" "No one who'll ever admit it." "That man you were supposed to marry?" She flinched, and that was answer enough. Cole let the silence stand. He wasn't built for soft talk, and she didn't look like she'd believe it anyway. He stepped outside for wood, the cold slicing through him clean as truth. When he came back, she'd folded his blanket neatly, her eyes red from quiet tears. "You don't owe me order," he said, dropping the logs by the fire. "Owe it to myself," she murmured. He nodded once, impressed despite himself. "When the snow stops, I'll take you down to the valley. You can rest at the ranger's cabin, maybe catch a coach west. And you?" "I keep riding," he said. "That's what I do." She looked up then, meeting his eyes for the first time. "And if they find me before that?" He took his revolver from the post, checked the chamber, then set it down within her reach. "Then you use that," he said. Her eyes widened. "You trust me with it? You trust me to leave it there?" Their gazes held in the orange flicker of the fire, something wordless passing between them. Respect born out of ruin. Outside, the snow thickened, the wind screaming like it had secrets to tell. And Cole wondered whether this storm had come to hide her or to test them both. The storm held them captive for 2 full days, snow piling high enough to bury the trail, the wind whistling through the pines like a sermon neither of them wanted to hear. Cole spent his mornings cutting wood, his afternoons mending traps he'd never set again, his nights staring into the fire that refused to die, no matter how much the mountain tried to snuff it out. Lena spoke little, her voice still brittle, but sometimes when she thought he wasn't listening, she'd hum softly. Old church tunes, or maybe just sounds her heart remembered from gentler years. Each note settled inside him like a pebble in a still creek, one he couldn't throw away. She was different from anyone he'd ever met. Too proud to beg, too wounded to lie. "You plan on keeping quiet the whole storm?" he asked one evening, pulling off his gloves. "You talk enough for both of us," she said, eyes on the flames. "Maybe," he replied, "but my words don't seem to warm much." That almost made her smile. He saw it flicker, quick as lightning, before she hid it again. Later, when she reached for more wood, he noticed her limp. "Your foot," he said. "You hurt it?" "Twisted it on the rocks coming up the ridge. I'll manage." "You'll make it worse," he said, and before she could argue, he crouched beside her, taking her ankle gently into his hands. She stiffened. "Don't." "I ain't doing nothing wrong," he murmured. "Just trying to keep it from swelling." He tore a strip from his shirt, wrapped it snug around her boot, and tied it firm. His hands were rough, but his touch was steady, careful, the way a man handles something breakable he doesn't want to lose. When he finished, she looked at him, eyes glistening in the firelight. "Why are you helping me?" "Because someone should have," he said. The words hung in the air, raw and heavier than the storm. She didn't reply, just stared into the flames as if they could explain mercy. Outside, the wind screamed and rattled the tent, but inside the space between them grew warmer, fragile as it was. Cole leaned back, staring at the glow painting her face, and thought maybe the mountain wasn't the only thing he'd been hiding from. When the storm finally broke, it didn't drift away. It simply stopped, as if the sky had decided it had tested them enough. The world outside the tent shimmered white and still, untouched but for the narrow circle of trampled snow where Cole's boots had worn a path between the woodpile and the fire. The quiet felt too clean, too sudden, the kind of silence that makes a man listen for what's missing. Cole stepped out first, breath curling into the cold morning. The sun had found its way through thin clouds, pale but determined, spilling light over the valley below. Behind him, Lena moved slower, her veil gone now, hair loose, her face softened by the kind of calm that comes after too much crying. She stood beside him, pulling his old blanket tighter around her shoulders. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Almost looks like peace." "Don't trust it," he said. "Mountains lie when they look gentle." She nodded, though her eyes stayed fixed on the view. "Guess everything does, sooner or later." He didn't argue. The snow crunched under his boots as he walked to the ridge to check the horses. When he came back, she was kneeling by the fire pit, feeding it the last of their kindling. "You keeping it going?" he asked. "Feels wrong letting it die," she said. "It's been the only thing that stayed warm." He watched her for a long moment, the flames painting her hair in gold. "Storm's over," he said. "You'll want to head down soon." "You'll take me?" "Till the valley." She hesitated. "And after that?" "After that," he said, "you decide what you are without running." She looked up at him, eyes clear but scared. "And if I don't know?" "Then stay till you do." The wind caught the edge of the tent flap, snapping it like a flag. For a heartbeat she thought he'd smile, but he didn't. He just looked at her like he was memorizing something he wasn't supposed to keep. "You should eat," he said finally, turning back to the horses. She watched him go, realizing that mercy could look a lot like distance, that sometimes the kindest thing a man could do was stay just far enough away not to break what he'd begun to heal. When the fire cracked again, she fed it one more branch, whispering a prayer she wasn't sure she believed. That the storm had ended outside, and not just in name. By midday, the calm felt wrong. Too heavy. The kind that comes before something breaks. Cole had gone down to the creek to check his traps when the first echo reached him. Horses, more than one, hooves muffled in the snow but clear enough to twist his gut. He moved fast, up through the pines, crouching near the ridge above the camp. 3 riders were crossing the draw, their coats clean, their horses shod for the valley, not the mountain. The one in front wore a black hat and a look that knew how to take what it wanted. Cole didn't need guessing. Men like that had a way of smelling desperation, and he'd seen what they left behind. He turned downhill, boots biting into the crusted snow. "Lena!" he called low as he ducked into the tent. She froze, a loaf of bread half cut in her hand. "They're comin'," he said. 3 riders. Valley folk. Her face drained of color. "It's him," she whispered. "He'll bring the preacher and a gun." Cole's jaw set. "You sure?" "I'd know that sound anywhere." The fear in her voice burned hotter than the fire between them. "Grab your coat," he said. "We'll move uphill. They won't follow far in this snow." But she shook her head. "You'll get shot for me." "Ain't my first bullet," he said, loading his rifle. "Ain't yours to stop either." She stepped in front of him, trembling but firm. "If you fight him, I become the cause. Let me talk." He met her eyes, steady, pleading, alive in a way that scared him more than the riders did. "If he touches you," Cole said quietly, "he won't breathe again." She didn't answer. She just pressed her hand to his arm for one heartbeat before pulling away. The sound of hooves grew louder. Snow scattering under the weight of horses. Cole pushed her behind the tent flap and stepped out into the clearing, rifle low but ready. The man in the black hat pulled his horse to a stop. "Heard you found something that don't belong to you," he said. Cole's breath came out in fog. "Didn't find her. She found a road." The man smirked. "Same thing. Roads lead back where they start." "Not this one," Cole said. "You turn around, you live." The man's eyes narrowed. "You'll die for her?" "No," Cole said. "I'll die right." The first gun lifted, the air splitting with the sharp click of a hammer. But before it could fall, Lena stepped out, veil gone, face calm, voice steady. "He didn't take me," she said. "He saved me." The wind swallowed her words, but the mountain heard everyone. They didn't speak for a long time after the riders left. The man in the black hat had glared once more, spat in the snow, and turned his horse downhill with a threat half muttered about law and shame. Cole stood there until their shapes disappeared into the trees, the echo of hooves fading like a heartbeat that didn't know when to stop. When he finally turned, Lena was sitting by the tent, her hands trembling but her chin lifted. "You should have let me go," she whispered. "Would have made no difference," he said. "Men like that don't take what they lose kindly." He knelt beside the fire, feeding it slow, the flames climbing back to life. The light caught the edge of her face, showing the bruise under her eye, like a memory that refused to fade. She looked at him through the shimmer of heat. "You think he'll come back?" "Not if he's smart," Cole answered. "But I've been wrong before." She drew her knees up, wrapped her arms around them, and said nothing more. The silence between them was different now, tense but alive, something unnamed stretching wide enough to feel but not touch. He poured her coffee, handed it over without meeting her eyes. "You should rest," he murmured. "You should too." "I don't sleep much," he said. "Too many ghosts. Do they ever leave?" "Not the good ones," he said quietly. She watched the steam curl between them, her breath rising to meet it. Outside, the wind dropped, and the world softened to stillness. Somewhere far off, an owl called. Lena stared at the fire. "You never asked why I ran." "Didn't need to," he said. "You were wearing a wedding dress in a blizzard. That told the story." She smiled faintly, eyes glassy. "You think God ever forgives women for not obeying?" He looked into the flames, then back at her. "If he don't, he's not worth your prayers." The words fell gentle but sure, and something in her posture loosened. She lay down near the fire, her back to him, the thin blanket pulled to her chin. He leaned against the post, watching the flames flicker low, shadows tracing her outline on the canvas wall. The air grew warmer, the night deeper. Neither of them moved. When the fire snapped, she whispered without turning, "Thank you." He didn't answer, only watched the embers breathe red in the dark, knowing that if he spoke, the quiet mercy between them might break. Cole woke before sunrise, the sky still bruised with night, the cold biting hard enough to make his breath come in sharp clouds. Lena was asleep beside the dying fire, her face half hidden under his old blanket, one hand resting near the ashes as if she'd tried to keep the flame alive in her sleep. He stood slowly, shoulders aching, every instinct telling him the same thing it always had: leave before you start wanting to stay. He saddled his horse in silence, the leather creaking like it disapproved. When he looked back toward the tent, she stirred, eyes blinking open, confusion soft at first, then clarity rushing in like pain. "You're leaving," she said, not asking. "Storm's past," he replied. "You'll be safer in the valley." She sat up, the blanket falling to her lap. "Safer ain't the same as whole." He stopped tightening the cinch, the words freezing him in place. "You think I can stay here?" he said. "Mountain's no place for ghosts." "Maybe not," she said, "but it's where I stopped being one." He turned toward her, and in the thin dawn light she looked different. No longer the runaway bride, but a woman who'd stared down fear and kept her soul. "You don't owe me nothing," he said. "Didn't ask for debt," she murmured. "Just not to be left without a goodbye." He hesitated, then stepped closer. Close enough to feel the warmth of the fire between them, but not close enough to cross it. "If I stay, the world'll make stories that ruin you." "If you go," she said, "I'll have to believe those stories were kinder than truth." The stillness between them stretched thin, every breath loud. Cole wanted to tell her she deserved a life untouched by scandal, that he was too old, too rough, too lost, but she already knew. She reached for his hand, her fingers trembling once before they steadied. "Then go," she said softly. But don't go thinking you didn't change something." He looked at her, memorizing every shadow on her face, then gently pulled his hand away. "You'll do fine," he said. "You're stronger than this mountain." He swung into the saddle, the horse shifting under him, the sound of snow cracking like glass beneath its hooves. "Cole," she called. He paused. "You were right," she said. "Some ghosts don't leave, but some bring you back." He tipped his hat, eyes burning with something that wasn't cold, and rode out toward the pale horizon, while behind him the fire flickered, refusing to die, as if waiting for the moment he'd turn around. The mountain swallowed him the way it always did, without ceremony, without sound. For 3 days, Cole rode through the high passes, cutting across frozen creeks and gullies, trying to let distance dull the ache that had begun to take shape inside his ribs. He told himself it was relief. He'd done the right thing. Left her safe, alive, unclaimed. But every mile felt heavier, every night quieter. By the 4th evening, the sky turned the color of burnt copper, and he made camp by a half-frozen stream, the same kind of fire he'd built 1,000 times before. Only this one burned wrong. It hissed and spat, a stubborn echo of the one he'd left behind. He poured coffee, took a drink, and found it bitterer than usual. When the wind shifted, he thought he heard her humming again, soft, uncertain, like memory sneaking through the trees. He cursed under his breath, threw dirt over the fire, and lay back, staring at the stars he'd once trusted to keep him company. They offered no answers, only silence. The next morning, he turned south, then west, then stopped. His horse stamped in protest, nostrils steaming in the cold. "Don't look at me like that," he muttered. "Ain't no sin in riding where a man's heart still is." But the mountain didn't move, and neither did he. He tried hunting to clear his mind, but every sound, the crack of a branch, the rush of the stream, carried her voice. By noon, he gave up pretending. He packed his gear, doused the fire, and turned the horse back up the trail. The climb took hours, the snow softer now, the air thin but clean. As he neared his old camp, he saw the column of smoke curling into the pale sky, and his stomach tightened. She was still there. He found her kneeling by the fire pit, feeding it fresh wood, her hair tied back, her face calm but tear-stained. When she saw him, she didn't speak, didn't smile, just looked at him like she'd known he'd come. "Thought you'd be halfway to Laramie by now," she said. "Thought so too," he replied, "but the road didn't agree." "You forget something?" He shook his head. "Just remembered what I shouldn't have left." She turned back to the flames, voice trembling. "It waited for you," she said. He looked at the fire, its steady light flickering across both their faces, and finally understood what the silence between them had been trying to say all along, that some fires burn not to keep you warm, but to remind you where mercy found you. The dawn came quiet, low clouds hanging over the peaks like tired sentries, the snow beginning to melt in slow silver veins that shimmered through the valley. Cole woke to the smell of coffee and the faint sound of humming, the same tune that had haunted him halfway down the mountain. For a moment, he didn't move. The warmth from the small fire reached him first, then the sight of Lena crouched by it, hair unbraided, face turned toward the light like someone who'd finally stopped hiding. "You're still here," she said, voice soft but certain. "Guess the trail didn't take," he replied, sitting up, rubbing his hands together. "Or maybe you just never meant it to." She handed him the tin cup. "You could have kept riding." "Could have," he said, "but there's a difference between leaving and quitting." She smiled faintly, staring into the fire. "You ever think maybe God sends folks twice? Once to teach and once to stay? If that's true, he sure don't warn a man about it. He don't warn women either, she said, but he listens better than he used to. He laughed under his breath, and the sound startled them both with how human it felt. They ate quietly, the kind of silence that didn't need filling. When he stood to fetch water, she followed, boots sinking into the soft snow, the air crisp with thaw. "You mean to keep wanderin'?" she asked. "Always figured I would," he said. "Never fit anywhere long." "Then why'd you come back?" He hesitated. "Because the road didn't feel like home anymore." She looked at him then, really looked, and the mountain light caught the faint scar along his jaw, the one she'd never asked about. "You saved me twice," she said. "First from him, then from the part of me that stopped hopin'. And you saved me once," he said. "Didn't know a man could get lost without movin' till I met you." The breeze moved through the trees, soft and alive, and for a long moment they just stood there, the creek whispering below. "What happens now?" she asked finally. "Now," he said, glancing toward the rising sun. "Now the world's gonna talk no matter what we do. Might as well give it something worth talking about." She smiled, eyes glistening, and reached for his hand. He didn't pull away this time. The sky broke open in pale gold, and for the first time in years, neither of them felt like they owed the mountain an explanation for staying. Summer crept up the mountain like forgiveness, slow, quiet, and certain. The snow melted into wildflowers that climbed the slopes in colors the earth must have kept hidden for years, and the creek ran clear enough to see its stones again. Cole built a small lean-to beside the cabin, fixed the roof, and mended the old fence that had collapsed under winter's weight. Lena planted herbs and a patch of corn, her laughter sometimes floating through the trees so softly he wasn't sure if it was real. The days came honest, without the fear that once lived in every sunrise. He still rode out at dawn, trapping or scouting, always coming back before dusk. Each night they sat by the same fire that had once burned for survival, now a quiet companion. No longer a plea to the heavens, just proof that mercy could stay warm without flame. "Funny," she said one evening, stirring the pot that hung above the coals. "I used to think love was loud." Cole smiled, rubbing his hands together. "Maybe that's just what people shout when they're scared it ain't real." "And what do you call this then?" she asked. "Peace," he said. She nodded, eyes soft. "Peace don't scare me anymore." The light faded to a soft blue, the air smelling of pine and smoke. He reached into his coat pocket and drew out the silver hairpin she'd dropped that first night in his tent. "Thought I lost that," she whispered. "You did," he said, "but the mountain found it." He set it beside her bowl. "Keep it. Reminds you where you started, not what you ran from." She smiled, tears glinting but not falling. "And you?" "I'll keep the rest," he said. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of everything they didn't need to explain. When the fire burned down to its last ember, Cole leaned back, staring at the sky stretched wide above the ridge. "You ever think about leaving?" she asked. "Not anymore," he said. "The road's had enough of me." "Then maybe it's time to rest." She pulled the blanket tighter, watching the last ember fade to gray. He reached over, took her hand, and the world around them exhaled. The fire finally slept, the wind softened, and in the stillness that followed, the mountain seemed to bow its head, not in mourning, but in quiet respect for two souls who had learned that sometimes love doesn't save you loud, it saves you slow. Please like, share, and subscribe to support more true-hearted frontier stories on Echoes of the West. If you were the one who found her in that tent, would you have stayed to face the fire, or ridden off before it burned out? Tell us in the comments.